He's the workaholic. I think he's never really stops.
They're a great live band. I think that's where their strength is.
They were unashamed in wanting to be very commercial and very polished, very ready for radio.
There's always been a spark of greatness in everything that they've done.
The band Bon Jovi began with the teenage musical ambitions of a young John Francis Bon Jovi Jr.
John Francis Bon Jovi Jr. was a New Jersey boy of Italian extraction, and his mother was a Playboy bunny, which I think tells you an awful lot about Bon Jovi, the pop group, and about John Bon Jovi himself. And from an early age, all he cared about was music. He was one of those kids who was obsessed by it.
From that point onwards, didn't really want to do anything else. Just started skipping school and getting into bands. And he was playing in bands supporting more successful acts around the area from about the age of 16.
So John's relative Tony gave him his first break, really, and his first introduction to a music recording studio. He owned a recording studio and he gave John his first job. I think John was kind of sweeping floors or something there. So he kind of was around musicians, and I think kind of it was Tony actually who got his first ever recording recording deal.
He made his recording debut on the Star Wars Christmas album. And John Bon Jovi was the voice of R2-D2.
Whilst writing jingles for a local radio station, a demo John recorded was picked up by one of the DJs. The song began to get airplay across New York.
Unfortunately, all the people who played on the demo version of Runaway refused to join his new band. So he, with the help of David Bryan, recruited Tico Torres and Alec John Such, who were friends of David Bryan's, and also the next-door neighbour of John Bon Jovi, Dave Sabo, who didn't last very long and parted on very friendly terms to form Skid Row. And then they got in Dave Sabo's friend, Richie Sambora.
I know that Richie Sambora is a guitarist. I think he was in local bands, and he was already got a reputation as the hotshot guitarist. I think he might have been playing with Joe Cocker's band.
He was in a band that were signed or about to be signed to Led Zeppelin's label Swan Song. So he definitely had a bit more experience in rock and roll than John Bon Jovi had at that point.
With the lineup complete, the band began playing the city's live circuit. Runaway had successfully made radio playlists outside of New York, and the group was signed to Mercury for their self-titled debut album.
Bon Jovi's first album, Bon Jovi, it wasn't a great record. It wasn't a great record then, it isn't a great record now. And you can tell by the way he self-consciously preens on the sleeve that it's not going to be a great record. It's a very flat production, it's very derivative. However, in Runaway, it has the first great Bon Jovi song.
On early kind of Bon Jovi, you can definitely hear the influence of Bruce Springsteen. I think you can hear Aerosmith in there as well. But I also think there's stuff like the Beatles too, with their sense of melody. So it was coming from that kind of heavy rock area, but there was also that kind of nod to the melodic side of the Beatles too.
But he was definitely influenced by Led Zeppelins and your Black Sabbaths and Deep Purple and the bands that had come before, and then the wave after that had come with Aerosmiths and bands like that. That was what entranced him, and that was what he wanted to follow in the footsteps of.
For their third album, they were very much on the cusp of being dropped and the dream finishing. Their ambition, though, was limitless, and it was suggested to them that they could get a little outside songwriting help in the shape of Desmond Child, who was a fairly well-known songwriter who'd done work with Kiss.
It's not the kind of thing that heavy metal bands generally do. What he did is he understood how to keep the band's image and the, playing on, guitar riffs and everything, but structure these things like pop songs, in the classic pop tradition.
In another move to guarantee success, the band took the songs they recorded with Desmond to the streets. The track listing chosen by the youth of New Jersey formed the album Slippery When Wet.
I think it shows they're really like a band of the people, and they respond to what people want. And I like the idea of these kids kind of choosing the tracks. And I think it's important to them as well to be a New Jersey band. That really feels like part of the Bon Jovi kind of story.
And the band are thinking, yeah, we want hits. We want these kids to buy our records, and so it was actually a kind of masterstroke, really.
Richie Sambora had to convince John to include one song in particular on the album. It was just as well as Living on a Prayer would go on to sell over 3 million copies.
She says we gotta hold on to what we've got. It doesn't make a difference if we make it or not. We got each other, and that's a lot more love. We'll give it a shot. Oh, we're halfway there. Oh, give it all a prayer.
If you hear the Bon Jovi box set, then there's the original version of Living on a Prayer, which is tucked away sort of guiltily somewhere around the back of the box set. And you can see why it wasn't the final version, and you can see why John had such problems with it, because it doesn't sound great.
I think it shows the foresight of Richie Sambora, this story, because he argued for it being on the record, and then they decided to re-record it.
She cries in the nighttime and whispers, baby, it's okay.
I think the record just is an instant kind of pop classic, really. It's like pop rock, personified, essentially.
These were just real blue-collar anthems. I think they just struck a chord in America. They were they're quite patriotic. They feel quite heroic, and they're made to fill stadiums. I mean, Living on a Prayer now, is kind of cheesy, but people still love singing along to it at midnight after 12 beers or whatever. So, it's just had that thing. It's kind of dumb, but there's some undeniable power to it.
Slippery When Wet sold 28 million records, and it kind of was part of that era of adult-orientated rock. And it just fitted into that, and it just, it worked on the radio. It had those big radio smash songs.
I think the real key is John Bon Jovi's ambition, which is, generally when a band is this successful, you need someone with an absolute drive. He was determined to prove that the band wasn't a one-hit wonder. So I think he felt the next one has got to be as big, if not bigger.
Slippery When Wet spent 8 weeks at the top of the Billboard charts. The band were intent on not being a one-hit wonder, though, and along with Desmond Child, they returned to the studio for the album New Jersey.
New Jersey, it wasn't just more of the same. It was an evolution. And you heard the first track, Lay Your Hands on Me. It took almost 2 minutes before they got into the song properly, with lots of sound effects and great big banging of drums. It sounded massive. And you knew at that moment that they'd done something that was capable of standing alongside Slippery When Wet.
That record had done well for a reason, and then they could continue it. And certainly with Bad Medicine, they proved it. They still could have hits afterwards.
They did see themselves as a people's band, really, and they saw themselves as a real band. And so the way to reflect the fact that you're a real band is to do lots of live videos, lots of fans in them.
They are a live band, and those videos represented that. And I think, They just loved playing live. They were touring all the time and perhaps a little unimaginative when it came to making videos. But I like the fact that they could kind of laugh about it as well.
Whilst the band took a break, John didn't, using the time to produce the solo album Blaze of Glory.
The John Bon Jovi solo career it's a strange thing because he can never split up the band because it's got his name on it. He can get rid of everybody, but it'll still be Bon Jovi. But he did the soundtrack to Young Guns.
I think it's just that he really likes collaborating with other people. I don't think he is a solo artist at heart. But I did think it was interesting that he did it at that point because I think it made him realise that he wanted to maybe take more control in the band and be the figure, the person that you identify with the band. So it made him take control and kind of take the lead, I guess, for forthcoming Bon Jovi stuff.
The hiatus didn't last long though. Bon Jovi returned to the studio for the album Keep the Faith. With a new sound and image, it marked a new chapter for the band.
Keep the Faith was the sound of Bon Jovi trying to be credible. This is the point of grunge, you know, grunge had happened in '92. And all of a sudden, you know, having a sort of poodle rock hairstyle and dressing up in spandex and jumping about the stage looks incredibly uncool. You know, when you've got Kurt Cobain, you know, having huge hits for wearing a dirty old shirt and ripped jeans and, you know, mumbling into his acoustic guitar or whatever. So I think it was their attempt to try and claw back a bit of credibility.
They were more than just these kind of jokey hair metal guys. It showed them to be kind of serious songwriters for the first time, I think. And also John Bon Jovi cut his hair and it hit the headlines. It's a massive deal.
His haircut was national news at that point, and it was the fact that he'd cut his hair and to signify we're going to be a bit more serious now. There was such a huge backlash against hair metal and bands with those ridiculous hairspray mullets.
Keep the Faith, it was rugged. It was a restatement of who they are. There was more of a gang feel to it. And it said, look, we know that we're never going to have albums which will be as phenomenal as Slippery When Wet and New Jersey again. But we can make albums that will sell an awful lot of records. And this is how we're going to do it. And essentially, that's what they've done for the rest of their career.
The album was to be the last with bassist Alec John Such, due to a split that revealed the ambition of John Bon Jovi.
John Bon Jovi is definitely the driving force of the band. It's called Bon Jovi. He's the workaholic. I think he's never really stops. You know, I think he's always thinking about the next project, which is why, you know, so Living on a Prayer comes out, 28 million album sales, you'd think most bands would say, okay, we're going to get lazy, take it easy, and he did the opposite. He came up with New Jersey, and it was kind of still going on. So I think when he sacked the bassist for Lazy-itis, then you know, that was why you got to work as hard as me, or you're out.
I mean, I think he'd earlier on in his career kind of sacked his managers and had a rethink about the way it was all going for the band. So yeah, he's absolutely in control at this point.
There's also another twist to it, in that they had the bassist, Hugh MacDonald, waiting in the wings. He'd been a long-standing partner of Bon Jovi, the group, and also he'd played on the very first demo of Runaway. So they'd had a relationship, and Hugh MacDonald didn't want to be part of Bon Jovi. He just wanted to make the records and play the concerts. He didn't want to do any interviews, he didn't want to do the photo sessions. He was like a permanent session man, an ideal relationship for everyone.
Although the band maintained a following, Bon Jovi struggled to make an impact with the singles from 1995's These Days. Grunge had taken over the music world, and they were looking a little out of place.
These Days came out around the time where Bon Jovi couldn't have been any less cool, really. I mean, the grunge scene was going on big at that time, and that's what everyone was into.
These Days was an attempt not to go grunge. It wasn't as clumsy as that, but just to be a little bit more earthy, to be a little bit more grounded. And of course, it turned out that it was one of their least successful records in America. People don't want a grounded Bon Jovi, they want a superstar, rocking Bon Jovi.
This ain't a song for the broken-hearted.
Superstar Bon Jovi came back in the year 2000. Collaborating with Swedish teen pop producer Luke Ebben, the album Crush marked a return to their 80s synths and Sambora's voice box. Lead single It's My Life introduced them to a whole new fan base.
Voice when I shout it out loud. It's my life. It's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever. I just wanna live my life. It's my life. My heart is like an open highway. Like Lincoln said, I did it my way. I just wanna live my life. It's my life.
I think Bon Jovi are really savvy. I think they're businessmen. I think they know exactly what they're doing. And they were trying out a more poppy sound on this record too. So yeah, they're very smart, and they kind of go after different markets, I think, with their music.
They unashamedly recycled the talkbox effect that they'd used on Living on a Prayer, which was obviously the thing that most people identified with Bon Jovi. So it was, I mean, It's My Life was Living on a Prayer Part 2.
It's my life, and it's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever. I just wanna live my life.
It also looked back, because it mentioned Tommy and Gina, the couple from Living on a Prayer, and it was just Bon Jovi moving with the times. It's a great Bon Jovi song. It's as good as the great Bon Jovi songs.
It's My Life topped the international charts, and in turn, so did Crush. The band have successfully continued to experiment with sounds for their latest releases, and today remain a live phenomenon.
This one goes out to the man who minds for miracles. This one goes out to the ones in need. This one goes out to the sinner and the cynical. This ain't about no apology.
Since Crush in the early 21st century, Bon Jovi just put out 4 or 5 albums that have all topped the charts. I mean, all their contemporaries from the 80s are not doing anywhere near as much business. So you have to hand it to them. They're doing something right, and they are connecting with their audience.
We weren't born to follow. Come on and get up off your knees.
The last 3 albums have been American #1s, and it was said that Lost Highway was the Bon Jovi's country album. It wasn't a country album at all. It was a Bon Jovi album with a bit of fiddles on it and Leanne Rimes. Still a Bon Jovi album, and it was great. The fiddles gave them new depth, and they've maintained a pretty high standard.
Bon Jovi just are a stadium rock band. They connect with people on that level. They have an ability to write a very catchy hit that sounds great in a big space, sung along by lots of people. That's what they do, and I think they'll just carry on doing that. They're a great live band, and I think that's where their strength is.
We weren't born to follow.
Bon Jovi, just good times. You know, it's good times. I mean, those songs like Living on a Prayer, you know, it reminds now I would have thought their audience is probably in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they're being reminded of the first, maybe their first kiss. It's straightforward good times. And I think that's the appeal.
It shows that if you have the songwriting basics, the ambition and the attitude and the work rate, that, yeah, it will happen.